We're speaking with James Keach right now. He is a filmmaker, but also an actor. And James, I just want to give listeners a reference to where they may recognize you from. The two things that I found most recognizable are, one, you were the state trooper in National Lampoon's Vacation who pulled over the Griswold family because they tied up that dog to the back of the family truckster and forgot about it and took off down the highway. And then the other one is you were Jesse James and one of the finest. I don't even know if you'd call this movie a Western. You wrote it, so tell me. The Long Ryders, along with your brother, Stacy Keach. Yeah, real quick. I don't know if I'd call that movie a Western. To me, Westerns are like cowboys and deserts and stuff, but this was different.
I actually, at the time, I called it a Midwestern.
There you go. That's
because it was about guys that came from Missouri, you know. I was going to say they fought on the side of they fought on the side of the Confederates, but they really weren't Confederates. They were by choice. The Yankees came in and killed their brother, and that was the end of that. They went to war with them. So
yeah,
but it was more of politics.
Yeah, great movie also. But you've been in several films and television, but you are also a filmmaker, and you've done a few films about musicians, most notably the Glen Campbell one, which was amazing, the late great Glen Campbell. You've done a film about Linda Ronstadt, David Crosby, and then you were a producer for the Jihnny Cash biopic Walk the Line. And now you have coming out today one on Greg Allman from the Allman Brothers called Music of My Soul. And I was just wondering, much like you, I mentioned your brother Stacy, who you worked with in that film, and I think in the Wright Brothers film. Was this appealing to you to take on this project because of that brother working relationship?
Absolutely. In fact, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to do it, was to really do a deep dive into what brotherhood is about, both on a biological relationship and also the Allman Brothers, all the brotherhood between all those guys. So, there's great similarities in the sense of the Long Ryders, a movie about Jesse James and all the brothers. That movie had 3 sets of brothers, if you remember.
Yeah.
Real brothers. And so this whole theme of brotherhood is one that's very dear to my heart. My brother and I are really, really close. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to really dig down. And also the tragedy of Dwayne's death when they just were being the number one band in the world at the time. And that and the integration piece, the movie about segregation, about a guy standing up against a lot of bigotry and racism in the South when they were playing all over the place. Greg's best friends were African Americans. His musical influences were Jackie Wilson and Otis Redding and Floyd Miles and Hank Moore and Little Anthony and the Imperials and so forth. So that was interesting. And then the other piece that really was very interesting to me and I think very important in Greg's life was his addiction and his recovery from that. And we've all got addiction in our family. Greg had it in spades, and on the height of his musical appreciation, and when he was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, was the lowest night of his life.
Wow.
Other than when his brother died. So the irony of that, because he was so messed up, he had gotten himself so messed up on alcohol, and it turned his life around. After 13, he'd been in 13 rehabs before. He tried really hard, but that was it. When he saw himself, and he couldn't thank his mom or his brother, and talk about Bill Graham and other members of the band. He was just messed up. And he looked at him. He said he just cried. He said, "I had to do something," and that it turned his life around. So it's a story of redemption too, and not to mention the incredible music that the man gifted all of us.
Yeah, I'm a big Allman Brothers fan, so I'm very excited to see this. And that band. I mean, it's amazing that story you told there about the highest of highs along with the lowest of lows, and it seemed like the band had a lot of that going on. And Greg himself, I mean, when he was very young, his father was murdered, but really the catalyst for, it sounds like a lot of the story is when his brother Dwayne died, and how he was, it seemed like he was very angry at the world about that.
He was. He said, I was angry at my brother for dying. I was angry at God for taking him.
Huh.
and he just didn't understand, why, and his brother was sober at the time. A lot of people think, well, Dwayne was messed up when he got in no, he was avoiding a semi truck, trying to get out of the way of it, and then he got thrown from his motorcycle, and the internal injuries took his life. He lasted a little while, got to the hospital. It didn't last too long.
And then also another tragedy in the band was they lost another member, I believe, in almost the same exact way, on the same exact spot in Macon. Yeah, Barry Oakley was on his motorcycle, and it was almost the same spot in Macon, Georgia. That's and he's somewhat of not much of like a biological brother, but somewhat of a brother too. So it's almost like he lost two brothers in a very short period of time.
He did. That's absolutely right. And Barry was devastated by the death of Dwayne too. They all were. Dwayne was the leader of the band.
Some of the guests in the film are, you've got Jackson Browne in there. You've got Warren Haynes, who was a longtime member. And then he would jam with them off and on, great guitar player. To you, who was the most interesting guest you have on the film talking about Greg?
Well, they're all different. Johnny Podell, his agent at the time, was an incredible character. I love talking with Chuck Leavell. Chuck is just, he came in and you can't, as he said, you can't replace Dwayne, but they brought Chuck Leavell in as a keyboardist to take over that position in the band. And Chuck is also the musical director and member of the Rolling Stones, So talking with him about the transition from where they were to where they are in the zeitgeist is fantastic. Jackson Browne, fantastic interview that we did with him. And I've done a few shows with him, and I just think he's great. That's a documentary that I'd love to make. Is his. But anyway, those guys, and when you mentioned Warren Haynes, they all have different points of view. It's like there's a movie called Rashomon where you have many different points of view of the same incident that took place, and that's the same thing about in making documentaries. You have different people have different ways of looking at the same person, and that's how we gather the overall picture of what somebody really was like.
So you mentioned you'd love to do a project about Jackson Browne, and I would love that too. That's an incredible story right there. Has there been any other names that have popped into your mind, or maybe someone has offered you to do a film about that sound interesting?
I have great admiration for a lot of the soldiers that I'm interested in a lot of different stories, not just musical stories, but McRaven, I don't know if you know who Admiral McRaven is. They call him the Bullfrog. It's just an incredible story of a guy who rises up out of from nowhere to be the number one SEAL, the Bullfrog. I'm intrigued by just great stories. For some reason, he comes to mind. It's a story that I like. I guess because I read all his books.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm very much looking forward to watching Greg Allman, Music of My Soul. As I said, I'm a big fan and interested to see all those different points of views. And James Keach, thank you very much for talking with me this morning. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.